I was standing in the kitchen of our brownstone in Brooklyn, washing dishes from Sunday dinner, when I saw the envelope slide under the door. My hands were covered in soap bubbles, warm water running over the plates, the sound of laughter from the living room floating through the apartment where my husband Marcus was playing cards with his sister. It was a normal evening, a peaceful evening, the kind I'd worked so hard to build after everything I'd been through. But before I tell you what was in that envelope, you need to understand how I got here. You need to know why his mother hated me from the moment we met. Because the truth was so much bigger than anyone could have imagined. My name is Nicole. I'm 28 years old. I grew up in foster care, bouncing from house to house in Philadelphia until I aged out of the system at 18, with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes and a high school diploma. No family, no money, no safety net. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college. I cleaned office buildings at night, served breakfast at a diner in the morning, and stocked shelves at a grocery store on weekends. I lived in a room I rented from an older woman who charged me almost nothing because she said I reminded her of her daughter. I ate ramen noodles and dollar menu hamburgers and saved every penny I could. By the time I was 23, I had an associate degree in business and enough money saved to move to New York City. I got a job as an assistant at a small marketing firm in Manhattan. The pay wasn't great, but it was better than anything I'd had before. I got my own studio apartment in Queens, tiny and old, but mine. I rode the subway to work every day feeling like I'd made it, like I'd escaped the life I was supposed to have. That's when I met Marcus. He came into the coffee shop where I sometimes grabbed breakfast before work. He was wearing a suit, looking stressed, juggling his phone and his briefcase and trying to order at the same time. He dropped his phone. I picked it up for him. He smiled at me like I'd just saved his life. We started talking. Just small talk at first. Then he started showing up at the same time I did. Then he asked for my number. Within a month, we were dating. Marcus was different from anyone I'd ever known. He came from a family with money, with history, with roots that went back generations in Brooklyn. His parents owned a brownstone in a nice neighborhood. His father was a retired lawyer. His mother had never worked a day in her life. His sister went to private school and took vacations to Europe. They were the kind of family I'd watched on TV growing up and thought only existed in movies. Marcus didn't care about any of that. He loved that I was different, that I'd built myself from nothing, that I didn't take anything for granted. He said I was the strongest person he'd ever met. He said I inspired him. We dated for a year before he proposed. It was simple, just the two of us in Central Park on a Sunday afternoon. He got down on one knee right there on the grass and asked me to marry him. I said yes before he even finished the question. That's when I met his mother. Her name was Diane. She was tall and elegant and cold as ice. The first time Marcus brought me to their brownstone for dinner, she looked me up and down like she was inspecting something she might buy at a store and deciding if it was worth the price. She asked where I went to college. I told her community college. She made a face like I'd said I'd never gone to school at all. She asked what my parents did. I told her I grew up in foster care. The room went silent. She actually put down her fork and stared at me like I'd confessed to a crime. She asked Marcus to help her in the kitchen, leaving me alone with his father and sister. When they came back, her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Marcus looked angry. The rest of dinner was tense and quiet. In the car on the way home, Marcus told me his mother had begged him not to marry me. She'd said I was clearly after his money, that I was using him, that girls like me always had angles, that he needed to be careful. He'd defended me. He'd told her she was being cruel and classist and wrong. He'd told her he loved me and he was going to marry me whether she approved or not. But the damage was done. From that night on, Diane made it clear she thought I was a gold digger. She never said it directly to my face, but I heard it in every comment she made, every question about where I grew up, every look when I wore something nice that Marcus had bought me, every time she mentioned how hard Marcus worked, like she was reminding me that his money wasn't mine. At our wedding, a small ceremony at City Hall with just immediate family, she wore black. Actually wore black like she was attending a funeral. She barely smiled in the photos. She didn't give a speech. She left right after we cut the cake. Marcus's father was kinder. His sister Lisa was nice to me. Friendly even. But Diane? Diane treated me like I was a disease her son had caught, and she was just waiting for me to be cured. For the first year of our marriage, I tried everything to win her over. I invited her to lunch. I called her on holidays. I sent her flowers on her birthday. I complimented her cooking. I asked for her advice. I tried to show her I loved her son, that I was good for him, that I wasn't what she thought I was. Nothing worked. She was polite but distant, always watching me, always looking for proof that she was right about me. Then, about 6 months ago, things got worse. Marcus got a promotion at his job. He worked in finance. Something complicated with investments that I didn't fully understand. The promotion came with a big raise. We started talking about buying our own place, maybe a condo in Brooklyn, something we could build equity in. When Diane found out, she invited us over for dinner. She seemed happy for once, almost warm. She hugged Marcus and congratulated him. She even hugged me, which she'd never done before. Over dinner, she brought up the idea of us moving into the brownstone with her. The top 2 floors were basically empty, she said. We could have our own space. We'd save money. It would be nice to have family close. Marcus looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I wanted to say no. Everything in me wanted to say no. But Marcus looked excited. He loved the idea of being close to his family, and the truth was, we could save a lot of money living there. Money we could use for other things. Money that could give us security. So I said yes. That was my first mistake. We moved in 2 months later. The top 2 floors of the brownstone became ours. We had our own entrance, our own kitchen, our own space. It should have been fine. It should have felt like our own place. But Diane had a key, and she used it. She'd let herself in when we were at work and rearrange things. She'd bring up food she'd cooked and leave it in our fridge with notes about making sure Marcus ate well. She'd comment on how we decorated, suggesting changes. She'd show up on Sunday mornings expecting us to come down for breakfast. It felt like living under a microscope. Marcus didn't see it the same way I did. He thought his mother was being helpful. He thought she was just excited to have us close. He didn't understand why it bothered me so much. But I felt watched, judged, like I was always one mistake away from her saying, "I told you so." Then things started disappearing. Small things at first. A piece of mail that never showed up. A credit card statement I never received. I thought it was just the mail getting lost or me misplacing things. But then my laptop went missing from our apartment. I'd left it on the kitchen table, and when I got home from work, it was gone. Marcus said he hadn't seen it. We searched everywhere. Nothing. A week later, some jewelry my foster mother had given me before she died, the only thing of value I owned that meant something to me, disappeared from my dresser. I asked Marcus if his mother had been in our apartment. He said she'd stopped by to drop off some of his mail that had been delivered downstairs by mistake. I didn't accuse her. I couldn't prove anything. But I knew. Then one morning, I came downstairs to leave for work and found Diane in the hallway, going through our mail. She jumped when she saw me, clutching the envelopes to her chest. She said she was just organizing it, making sure we got everything. But her hands were shaking and her face was red, and I knew she was lying. That's when I realized she was looking for something, searching for proof of whatever story she'd convinced herself was true about me. I told Marcus that night. I told him I thought his mother was going through our things. He didn't want to believe it. He said his mother would never do that. He said I was being paranoid. We fought about it. Really fought. The kind of fighting that makes you wonder if your marriage can survive it. He moved downstairs to sleep on his mother's couch that night. I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had gotten to this point. The next morning, Marcus came back upstairs looking exhausted. He said he'd talked to his mother. He said she'd admitted to going through some of our mail because she was worried about us. Worried about me, specifically. She'd told him she had a bad feeling about me, that something didn't add up about my past, that she was just trying to protect him. He'd defended me again. He'd told her she needed to stop, that she needed to trust his judgment, that she needed to respect our privacy. But I could see the doubt in his eyes, just a flicker of it. Just enough to tell me that some part of him was wondering if his mother might be right. That's when I knew I needed to tell him the truth, the whole truth, the thing I'd been hiding since before we met. But I was scared, so scared. Because once I told him, everything would change. There would be no going back. So I stayed quiet. I pushed it down. I pretended everything was fine. That was my second mistake. 2 weeks later, Marcus came home from work looking troubled. He sat down on the couch and asked me to sit next to him. His voice was careful, measured, like he was trying not to upset me. He told me his mother had hired a private investigator to look into my background. I felt my stomach drop. He said he'd told her not to. He said he'd argued with her. But she'd done it anyway. She'd paid someone to dig into my past, to find out everything they could about me. The investigator was supposed to deliver his report tomorrow. Marcus looked at me with those eyes I loved, those eyes that had always made me feel safe, and he asked me a question I'd been dreading since the day we met. Is there anything I should know? Anything you haven't told me? I wanted to tell him everything right then. I opened my mouth to say it all, but fear stopped me. Fear of losing him. Fear of losing this life. Fear of going back to being alone. So I lied. I said no. I said there was nothing to find. I said his mother was wasting her money. He believed me. Or he wanted to believe me. He hugged me and said everything would be fine, that the investigator would find nothing, and his mother would finally stop this nonsense. I hugged him back and felt like I was going to be sick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about what the investigator might find, thinking about how much I'd hidden, thinking about how to explain things I'd never wanted to explain to anyone. The next day felt like it lasted forever. I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on anything. I paced around our apartment like a trapped animal. I checked my phone every 5 minutes even though I didn't know who I was waiting to hear from. Marcus texted me around 3 in the afternoon saying he was coming home early, saying the investigator was delivering the report at 5, saying his whole family would be there. His whole family. This wasn't just going to be private. This was going to be a spectacle. Diane wanted everyone to witness whatever the investigator had found. I thought about running. Actually thought about packing a bag and leaving before Marcus got home, starting over somewhere else, disappearing again like I'd done before. But I couldn't. I loved him too much. I'd built too much here. So I stayed. Marcus got home at 4:30. He looked as nervous as I felt. He held my hand and told me it would be okay. He told me he loved me no matter what. I held on to those words like a life raft. At 5 o'clock, we went downstairs. Diane was in the living room with Marcus's father, Robert, and his sister, Lisa. They all looked tense. Diane looked almost excited, like she was about to win something she'd been competing for. We sat down. Nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. At 5:15, the doorbell rang. Diane jumped up to answer it. She came back with a man in his 50s, average height, carrying a manila folder. He introduced himself as James Patterson, private investigator. He sat down in the armchair across from all of us. He opened his folder. He looked at me for a long moment, his face neutral, giving nothing away. Then he started talking. He said he'd been hired to investigate my background, to verify my identity, to check for any criminal history, any outstanding debts, any evidence of fraud or deception. He said he'd done a thorough investigation. He'd traced my history from birth to present day. He'd checked court records, financial records, employment history, everything he could find. Diane was leaning forward in her seat, practically vibrating with anticipation. The investigator looked directly at her and said he'd found some very interesting information. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. He said that everything I'd told Marcus about my background was true. I had grown up in foster care. I had worked multiple jobs to put myself through school. I had moved to New York with nothing. Everything checked out. Diane's face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly. She asked if that was all he found. He said no. He pulled out a document from his folder. He said he'd found something else. Something I hadn't told anyone. This was it. This was the moment everything fell apart. He handed the document to Diane. She read it. I watched her face go from smug to confused, to shocked to pale. Actually pale, like all the blood had drained out of her face. She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something like horror mixed with shame. The investigator explained what the document showed. When I was 16 years old, still in foster care, I'd been placed with a family in Philadelphia, the Hendersons. They had 3 kids of their own, all younger than me. The father, Tom Henderson, worked in construction. The mother, Mary Henderson, stayed home with the kids. I'd lived with them for 8 months. They were nice enough at first. They gave me my own room. They included me in family dinners. They seemed like they might actually want me. Then one night, Mr. Henderson came into my room. I won't go into details about what happened, about what he did, about how many times he did it over the next 3 months, about how I tried to tell Mrs. Henderson and she didn't believe me, about how she said I was a liar trying to break up their family, about how I ran away in the middle of the night and lived on the streets for 2 weeks before the police found me and sent me to a group home. What the document showed was the court case that happened after I reported what he'd done, the investigation, the trial, the conviction. Tom Henderson was sentenced to 15 years in prison for what he'd done to me and to another foster girl who came forward after I did. The document also showed that I'd received a settlement from the state for the abuse I'd suffered in their care. $250,000. Money I'd never touched. Money that had been sitting in an account for 12 years, earning interest, growing into nearly $400,000. Money I'd never told Marcus about. The investigator explained that I'd been using a different last name back then. My birth name before it was changed by the state when I went into foster care. That's why the records were hard to find. That's why it hadn't come up in basic background checks. But he'd dug deeper. He'd found everything. The room was completely silent. Diane was still staring at the document, her hands shaking. Marcus was looking at me with tears in his eyes. Nicole, why didn't you tell me? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. Tears were streaming down my face. The investigator continued. He said his investigation had also revealed that I'd been donating money anonymously to organizations that helped foster children. Thousands of dollars every year. Money from my settlement. Money I'd been using to try to help kids like I'd been. He said I'd sponsored 4 different kids through college, paid for their tuition, their books, their housing, without ever meeting them, without ever wanting recognition. He said I'd been volunteering at a group home in Queens every Saturday for the past 3 years, tutoring kids, helping them with homework, being someone who showed up consistently in their lives. All things I'd never told Marcus. All things I'd done quietly, privately, because I didn't want attention. Because I didn't want to explain where the money came from. Because talking about the money meant talking about why I had it, and talking about that meant reliving the worst thing that ever happened to me. The investigator closed his folder. He said that in 20 years of doing this job, he'd never investigated someone and found them to be more honest, more decent, or more worthy of respect than what he'd found with me. He looked at Diane and said she should be grateful her son had found someone like me, that she should be apologizing for putting me through this invasion of privacy when all I'd ever done was survive horrible things and try to help others survive them too. Then he stood up, handed her his invoice, and left. The silence after he walked out was deafening. Diane was crying now. Actually crying. She looked at me, and her voice came out broken. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought, I thought you were trying to take advantage of him. I thought you were lying about who you were. I thought—" She couldn't finish. She just kept crying. Marcus was beside me, his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked again, his voice soft. I finally found my voice. It came out rough, barely more than a whisper. "Because I didn't want to be that person, the person that terrible thing happened to. I didn't want you to look at me different. I didn't want anyone to know. But the money," he said. "All that money. We've been struggling and you had—" "It's blood money," I said, and my voice was hard now. "It's money I got because someone hurt me. I can't spend it on myself. I can't use it to make my life better like it's some kind of prize for surviving. It feels wrong. The only thing that feels okay is using it to help other kids who are going through what I went through." Marcus pulled me tighter. His father, Robert, was crying too. Lisa got up and came over and hugged me, something she'd never done before. Diane stood up slowly. She walked over to where I was sitting. She got down on her knees in front of me. This woman who'd treated me like garbage for 2 years, and she took my hands in hers. "I am so sorry," she said again. "For everything. For not trusting you. For treating you like you weren't good enough. For hiring someone to dig into your life. For every comment I made, and every way I hurt you. You didn't deserve any of it. You've never deserved any of it." I looked at her and saw real shame in her eyes. Real regret. But I also felt something break open inside me. All the hurt she'd caused. All the times I'd tried to win her approval. All the ways I'd made myself smaller to fit into her expectations. "I needed you to love me," I said, and I was crying harder now. "I needed you to accept me. I've never had a family, never had a mother. And I thought maybe, if I tried hard enough, you could be that for me. But you never gave me a chance. You decided who I was before you even knew me." "I know," she sobbed. "I know. And I was wrong. So wrong. You are exactly the kind of person I should want for my son. You're strong and kind, and you've overcome things I can't even imagine. You're remarkable. And I'm sorry it took hiring an investigator to make me see what was right in front of me the whole time." We sat there crying together, this awkward, broken moment where years of hurt were finally being acknowledged. Marcus was crying too. His father. His sister. Everyone was crying. After a while, Diane asked if she could hug me. I hesitated, then nodded. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tight and whispered over and over how sorry she was. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the hurt. But it was something. It was a start. That evening, after everyone had cried themselves out and we'd somehow ended up eating dinner together in Diane's dining room, Marcus and I went back upstairs to our apartment. We sat on the couch and he held my hand and asked me to tell him everything. Every detail I'd never shared. Every piece of my past I'd kept hidden. So I did. I told him about all the foster homes, about the good ones and the bad ones and the ones that were just indifferent. I told him about sleeping in a park for 2 weeks after I ran away. I told him about the group home and the other kids there and how we all protected each other. I told him about aging out of the system and being absolutely terrified of ending up on the streets permanently. I told him about the trial and how hard it was to testify, about having to describe what happened to a room full of strangers, about the Henderson family's lawyer trying to make me look like a liar, about finally hearing guilty and feeling like maybe justice existed after all. I told him about the settlement and how I'd almost refused it, how it felt like taking payment for being hurt. But my lawyer convinced me to take it, said I could do good things with it, help other kids. I told him about every kid I'd sponsored through college, their stories, their dreams, about the group home where I volunteered and the kids there who reminded me so much of myself. I told him everything I'd been holding in for years, and he listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just held my hand and listened. When I finished, he pulled me close and said he loved me more than ever, that my strength amazed him, that he was sorry I'd had to carry all of this alone. But then he asked me something I wasn't expecting. "What do you want to do with the money? Really? If you could do anything?" I thought about it. I'd never let myself really think about it before. The money had always felt like something I had to hide, something shameful. But sitting there with Marcus, finally being completely honest, I let myself dream. "I want to open a home," I said slowly. "A real home for older foster kids, the ones who are about to age out. A place where they can stay longer, get more support, learn life skills. Where they can feel safe while they figure out who they're going to be. Where someone actually cares if they make it." Marcus smiled. "Then let's do it." "What?" "Let's do it. You have the money. I can help. We can make it happen. It would be a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of everything." "So? You've been doing hard things your whole life. Let me help you do this one." That's when I started crying again. But this time they were different tears. Not tears of hurt or fear or shame, tears of relief, tears of hope, tears of finally being seen for who I really was. The next few weeks were strange. Diane tried hard to make up for how she'd treated me. She invited me to lunch. She asked about my life, really asked, and listened to the answers. She apologized again and again until I finally told her she could stop, that I believed her. She told me she'd grown up privileged, never struggling for anything, never having to fight for survival. She said she'd made assumptions about people who came from nothing, assumed they must be looking for handouts or taking advantage. She'd been wrong. She knew that now. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. Slowly, carefully, we started building something that almost looked like a relationship. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still times when old tensions flared up. But we were trying, both of us. Marcus's father, Robert, started helping me research what it would take to open a home for foster kids, the legal requirements, the zoning laws, the funding options. He used his law connections to help navigate the paperwork. Lisa started volunteering with me at the group home. She said she'd never realized how many kids were in the system, how many needed help. She wanted to do something that mattered. Marcus and I started looking at properties. Big old houses that could be converted, places with enough room for multiple kids, common spaces, a real kitchen where we could cook family dinners. We found one in Brooklyn, a beautiful old Victorian that needed work but had good bones. It was expensive, but between my settlement money and a loan, we could make it work. We bought it 6 months after that investigator delivered his report. We spent another 6 months renovating, making it perfect. Bedrooms for 8 kids, bathrooms that actually worked, a kitchen big enough to cook in, a living room where kids could hang out, a study area, A backyard. We got licensed as a foster home. We hired staff. We made it official. And then we opened our doors. The first kid who moved in was a girl named Tasha, 17 years old, about to age out of the system with nowhere to go. She was angry and defensive and didn't trust us at all. I understood her completely. Within a month, we had 5 kids. Within 6 months, we were full. We helped them with homework, with job applications, with college applications, with learning to cook and do laundry and manage money, with all the things nobody had taught them. But mostly, we just showed up. Every day. Consistently. Letting them know someone cared if they made it. Diane started coming by every week. She'd cook meals for everyone. She'd talk to the kids, ask about their lives, treat them like they mattered. She said it was her way of making up for her past mistakes. Not just to me, but to all the kids like me she'd never thought about before. A year after we opened, Tasha graduated high school. She'd been accepted to community college with a scholarship we'd helped her apply for. At her graduation, she gave a speech about second chances and people who believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. She looked right at me when she said it. I cried through the whole speech. After the ceremony, she came up to me and Marcus and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Thank you for seeing me. Not just the angry foster kid, but me, the real me, the one who's scared and trying so hard. Thank you for not giving up on me." That's what this was all about. Being seen. Really seen. For who you actually are, not who people assume you are. Diane had assumed I was a scammer, but the truth was so much more complicated. I wasn't trying to take advantage of her son. I was trying to survive. I was trying to build a life. I was trying to help other people who'd been through what I'd been through. The investigator's report didn't just expose my past, it exposed Diane's prejudices. It forced her to see that she'd been wrong. It forced everyone to see that people who come from nothing aren't automatically trying to take something from people who have everything. Sometimes people who come from nothing are just trying to help other people escape nothing too. 2 years after we opened the home, we had helped 15 kids transition out of foster care and into stable lives. 12 were in college. 2 had jobs and their own apartments. 1 had joined the military. All of them stayed in touch. All of them came back to visit. All of them called our place home. Marcus and I had also started a nonprofit to help fund similar homes in other cities. We used the rest of my settlement money to get it started. We were working on opening a second location in Philadelphia, in the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Full circle. Diane became one of our biggest supporters. She volunteered regularly. She donated money. She told everyone she knew about what we were doing. She'd become the mother I'd always wanted, not despite what she'd learned about me, but because of it. The truth I'd been so afraid to tell had set everything in motion. It had destroyed the walls I'd built around my past. It had forced me to be vulnerable in ways I'd spent years avoiding. But it had also freed me. I wasn't ashamed anymore. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was using what happened to me to help other people, openly, proudly, and that changed everything. One evening, 3 years after that investigator showed up with his report, I was in the kitchen of our home, the foster home, not our apartment, helping one of the kids, a 16-year-old named James, make dinner. He was quiet as usual, focused on chopping vegetables. Then suddenly he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "Why do you do this?" "Really? You could be doing anything else with your money and your time. Why this?" I thought about how to answer, how to explain something so complicated in a way that made sense. Finally, I said, "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to be someone people look past or look down on, to feel like you don't matter. and I never want another kid to feel that way if I can help it." He nodded slowly. Then he said something that hit me right in the chest. "You're not invisible anymore. You know that, right? You matter. To all of us. You matter so much." I had to turn away so he wouldn't see me crying. That's what the investigator's report had really revealed. Not just my past, but my worth. Diane had hired him to prove I wasn't good enough for her family. Instead, he'd proven I was exactly what her family needed. Someone who understood struggle. Someone who understood survival. Someone who used pain as fuel to help other people instead of becoming bitter or closed off. The report had shown that I wasn't a scammer. I wasn't a gold digger. I wasn't any of the things Diane had assumed. I was a survivor, a helper, a fighter, a woman who'd been through hell and decided to build a ladder out so other people could climb out too. That night, after the kids were in bed and Marcus and I were walking home through the quiet Brooklyn streets, he took my hand and said something that made me stop walking. "I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I'm so proud of who you are, of everything you've built, of how you turned something terrible into something beautiful." I leaned into him, feeling the weight of 3 years of healing in that moment. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, "without you believing in me." "You could have," he said. "You're the strongest person I know, but I'm glad I got to be part of it." We walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, my hand in his, both of us knowing that we'd built something real, something that mattered. The woman Diane had tried to expose was so much more than she'd imagined. I wasn't perfect. I still had hard days. Days when the past crept up. Days when I felt overwhelmed by everything we were trying to do. But I had something now I'd never had before. I had family. Real family. Not just Marcus, but Diane and Robert and Lisa and all the kids who'd come through our home. People who knew my whole story and loved me anyway. I had purpose. A reason to wake up every morning. A reason to keep fighting. I had peace. Finally, after years of running from my past, I'd made peace with it. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and used it to create the best thing. The investigator's report had been meant to destroy me. Instead, it had freed me. Sometimes the truth does that. It breaks everything open. It forces you to face things you've been hiding from. It makes you vulnerable in ways that feel dangerous. But on the other side of that breaking open is something better than what you had before. Honesty, connection, real love. That's what I found on the other side of that envelope sliding under my door. That's what Diane found when she turned pale and apologized. The truth that I wasn't who she thought I was. I was someone so much stronger. And that truth changed all of us.